I want to welcome everybody to the April 7th Planning Commission meeting. First item on the, well, let's see, I need to hear the public announcements, please.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the Planning Department. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the district court.
Thank you. First item we'll have is roll call.
Yes, sir. Bill Johnson,
Here.
Fox,
Present.
McKay,
Here.
Green,
Here.
Dool. Dool is absent. Blick. Josh Blick.
Present.
Present. Thank you. Nix.
Here.
Foster. Here. Here. Warren.
Here.
Joe Johnson.
Here.
Miles.
Here.
Hartman.
Here.
Mr. Florence is no longer on the MAPC. Mr. Williams Bay.
Here.
Show 13 members present.
Thank you.
Did you call my name, Scott? I didn't hear it.
No, you were correct. I've got an incorrect list.
It's okay.
Yes, okay, I see what happened. Okay, I see the mix-up. Yes, Cunningham is here.
Next item on the agenda is approve the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of March 17th. I show Mr. Hartman, Ms. Miles, Mr. Green, and myself not present at that meeting.
Move for approval.
Second. Got a motion to approve. I got a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Me too.
I abstain.
I abstain.
Okay, now we're going to consider the subdivision items, and we'll go through to see what ones we can take on consent. Item number 2, 2.1, subdivision 2019 00037. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take that on consent. The next one is subdivision 2022-00010, one-step final plat meets addition. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Anybody, commissioners that are virtual, want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Is there anybody virtual want to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take that on consent. Now we got subdivision case 2022-00014. Anybody want to hear this case on the commission? How about the commissioner members that are virtual? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take that on consent.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we
I move
approve
for
items.
approval of 2.1, 2.2, and 3.
Second.
Oh, Johnson.
Got a motion to approve by Joe Johnson, second by Ms. Miles. Any discussion?
You gotta be quick.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I think that carries unanimously. Public hearing vacation item 2022-00003. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take this on consent. Now we got vacation case 2022-00004. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the chambers here want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take that on.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve items 3.1 and 3.2.
Second.
Got a approval, Mr. Green and Mr. Hartman seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay. Now we're going to go through the public hearing agenda. Anybody want to hear a CUP 2022-00008? Anybody on the commission want to hear that case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? We'll take that on consent. Next item is 4.2 PUD 2022-00003. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Okay, we'll hear that case. The next one is PUD 2022-00004, and we're going to hear this case, correct? Okay, and, item 4.4, 4.5, and 4.6 have all been deferred till May 5th. So we will not hear zoning cases 2022 00015, 2022 00016, zoning case 2022 00017. Those will be deferred till the May 5th. Next one's 4.7, zoning case 2022 00018. Anybody on the commission want to hear that case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear that case? Anybody in the commission here want to hear that case? 2022 00018. Is there anybody virtual want to hear that case? We can take that on consent. So do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve items 4.1 and 4.7. Second.
Motion to approve by Mr. Green, second by Mr. Warren. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, before we go through the ones that we're gonna hear, I wanna leave the planning commission meeting and go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And, first item on the agenda is approve of the minutes of the February 17th. I show Mr. McKay, Mr. Flick, Hartman, and who else was
Nix.
Hartman?
Move for approval.
Nix.
Next.
Second.
Okay, who made the motion?
Mr. Joe Johnson.
Joe Johnson made the motion, second by Mr. Green. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? The other thing is on the BZA, item 2022-00006 has been deferred till April 21st, so we will not hear that case. And I believe we're going to hear the next case. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, sir.
So this would be BZA 2022-00005. We will hear that case.
Bill Longnecker, Senior Planner. As the chair noted, this is variance case BZA 2022-00005. It's a request for a variance to increase the sign surface area of an on-site pole sign. As you can see by the zoning map, the property is zoned limited commercial. It is an interior lot that has frontage along US 54 Kellogg, which is an expressway. This site is also located within Airport Hazard Zone A due to its proximity to Wichita Dwight David Eisenhower National Airport. So the applicant is asking to permit a sign that exceeds the allowable square footage according to the linear footage of the site. The linear footage of the site is 181.8 feet. Sign code allows you to figure your sign surface by using 80% of that linear footage and determining what your sign would be. And per that linear footage, on this particular site, you're looking at 145 square foot of sign surface. The applicant notes that the sign code allows a maximum 300 square foot sign surface on limited commercial property that is adjacent to an expressway and arterial, which Kellogg is. Now, to have that 300-foot assigned surface, that means the site would have to have 375 linear feet of frontage along the expressway. So we're looking at a doubling that area to get that 300 feet. Looking at the sign's purpose, we're looking at it in regards to provide adequate time to alert drivers on West Kellogg, US 54, the sign surfaces. And the applicant states the improvements on this section of Kellogg US 54 have limited access to the subject site from Kellogg US 54. That combined with the 60-mile-an-hour speed limit necessitates a larger sign to improve the driver's attention and decision-making. Illumination for this two-phase sign will be provided by digital components of the sign. So we noted the zoning of this particular site. It's limited commercial. As you can see on the zoning map, most of the properties abutting and adjacent to it are actually zoned general commercial, and they're developed with large retail box or small retail box. Could we have the next slide, please? You also have a lot of limited industrial zoning, and then you've got some single family further removed north. There's an aerial of the site. As you can see, some of the immediate development, including the abutting east and west properties, which are retail, freestanding retail, as well as retail strip. Could we have the next slide, please? You're looking at the 2035 future land use growth map. There's no change in regards to what's going to happen in this area. It is a commercial corridor. Could we have the next slide, please? That shows this sign's location on the particular site. Could we have the next slide, please? There is a rendering of the proposed sign, as I've stated, is a pole sign and is used to advertise the services provided on that property. There's a scale given there by the applicant in regards to the height. Do we have the next slide, please? There's the site itself, and you can see the expressway as well as the drive along this. That's actually Kellogg Drive. Can we have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. There's some signage along the area. As you can see, we've got signage here that provides information about multi-tenants in these retail strips that are along this particular section of Kellogg Drive. You can also see further down in the right-hand side a freestanding pole sign, which is a bit different than what we see. We see mostly multi-tenant signs along this stretch. Could we have the next slide, please? That's looking across the expressway to some development that is located south of the site. That is all GC, general commercial zoning. You can see a motel as well as a restaurant. Could we have the next slide, please? There's a car lot with a off-site billboard on it. Could we have the next slide, please? And there's the abutting west properties. As you can see, the site itself is almost on grade with the Kellogg Drive itself. The applicant has given the elevations for that property, subject property, as well as the highway. Let's get right to looking at the criteria in regards to granting a variance. The first criteria is the request is unique to the property and was not created by the applicant. The applicant states that the city's improvements to West Kellogg US 54, which is the main east-west route through the city, has created limited access from Kellogg US 54 to the subject site. Access is limited to the site from West Kellogg US 54 at the expressway's interchanges at mile intervals. In this case, that would be the South Ridge Road interchange. we also have an intersection with Dugan Road, which is midway between, it's just to the east of the site. The applicant has also noted that these improvements in regards to making this an expressway, you've got 60 miles per hour on West Kellogg US 54. These improvements to the highway, which includes the speed, necessitates a larger sign to improve the driver's attentiveness in decision-making. And the applicant has pointed out that it's the city's actions in improvements to Kellogg's and not the property owners that created this hardship. And that hardship is what they're saying, why they need the larger sign surface in regards to making sure that folks on this expressway have enough time to see what it is all about. The staff agrees that features along the improvements to Kellogg US 54 are not the results of the action by the applicant, but by the city. And that they note that the 60-mile-an-hour speed limit and this expressway inside the city is a unique feature for this section of roads in the city. Staff notes that the features in Kellogg US 54 impact all businesses located along this right-of-way. So it's not unique to just this property, it's unique to every property between basically 143rd Street East and 119th Street West, where you have no signal intersections or intersections that would impede the speed of these vehicles going east to west through the city. But again, staff does agree that there's unique in regards to this type of roadway through the city, but this particular property is not unique to that. It's impacted by all these properties along US 54 Kellogg. Let's look at the second criteria. Granting of the variance will not adversely affect the rights of the adjacent property owners or residents. The applicant states the nearest residential property is located over 1,200 feet north of the proposed sign or buffered by the proposed sign by GC zone, multiple big retail strip buildings. That's true, we agree with that. The applicant also states properties along this section of US Kellogg 54 developed with commercial, industrial, and office uses that would not be negatively impacted by the variance. Staff agrees that the area's residential properties would not likely be directly adversely impacted by the proposed sign, which is all pointed towards the directional traffic, the two-way sign on US 54. And there's sufficient space between the subject side and those residences. Staff goes on to say that the existing developments and their signage would not entirely agree that the proposed sign would not adversely impact those existing properties. Criteria 3, application of the provision of sign code would constitute necessary hardship on the applicant. Applicant states without the increased size, the visibility of the sign will be difficult to place an unnecessary burden on the applicant. The need for readable signage is a basic need for any business. Staff agrees that the need for readable signage is basic need for any business. However, there are multiple businesses with signs in this area that are not as tall or as large as the applicant's requested sign. Staff finds the required compliance with sign codes does not constitute unnecessary hardness. There are a few signs of similar size and height in the area as previously noted. Criteria 4, the variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, general welfare, or harmonious development of the community. Applicant states the variance will have a positive effect on public safety. Applicant states that studies show that when signs are easily visible from a roadway, it improves the driver's attentiveness, without which a driver might have to look away to obscure signage, thus creating a possible dangerous situation. Applicant also states that because the area is developed out, there will be no impact on the harmonious development of the community. Staff agrees that the proposed increase in the sign size may have a positive effect on public safety as stated above by the applicant. Staff is not in complete agreement the size of the sign will not have an impact on the harmonious development of the community. We've noted that there are multiple existing signs in the area that are in conformance with the sign code. Staff feels approval of the variance would diminish the value and effectiveness of the existing business's sign. The last criteria, the granting of the variance will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the sign code. Applicant states that the sign code recognizes the balance between public view and ability to see a sign. Applicant states that a square footage of the proposed sign service is equal to or less than other signs along West Kellogg, US 54. Staff notes that the applicant failed to provide the linear footage of the properties in the area and correspondent with the permitted height and size of those property signs. In addition, the staff notes that the general intent of the sign code is to provide for a more uniform and orderly appearance of the community. And providing a variance for additional sign surface on this site would seem to be opposed to this intent. So, we're in partial agreement with some of the applicant's statements in regards, but we are seeing things a little differently on some areas in regards to the intent of the sign code in regards to providing an orderly appearance and just generally, I mean, we see signs out there that are larger than this sign. We see signs that are also in compliance with the sign code. Staff only found one variance that we listed, and that was some 200 feet west of here, and that was done back in the 90s. And that increased the sign of this, the sign size for that particular site. With that, I'll stand for question.
Any questions of staff?
I've got one. What did the Wichita Airport Advisory Board determine in their meeting on the 4th?
We met with the Wichita Advisory Board Monday, the applicant and staff, and they gave advice in regards to how to address the height, which they're permitted 25 feet, but the airport hazard zone only allows A. Now, there's a two-step process in regards to seeing if the 30-foot would be allowed in this hazard zone. And the Airport Advisory Board advised the applicant of those steps and gave a site for the applicant to go ahead and pursue that if they wanted to. At this point, the applicant is, my understanding, and the applicant's agent is here, is my understanding the applicant is going to go with a 25-foot height. Okay. And if the, it's up to the property owner, if they want to pursue that extra 5 feet, then it's up to them to go through the process. We've also noted in the staff report that per the sign code, you can get up to 35 feet through a process on this, where this particular, where you're located on interior lot on the expressway with the zoning, you can have 2 on-site signs. However, if you only use one of those, then you can boost your height up to 35 foot, which would allow the applicant to do it up to 30 feet. That's not per administrative adjustment, that is just per the sign code. So there's a possibility this could be 30 foot, but that's up, the agent has left that up to the property owner to pursue that with the FAA. So right now, the only thing we're looking at is the sign surface. And even if we were looking at a 30-foot sign, that would not be a variance that would be permitted by the sign code, but that airport hazard zone complicates that matter.
Yeah. Since it's in Zone A of the airport.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Any other questions of staff? Thank you, Bill. Applicant or agent? Give us your name and address. You got 10 minutes.
Does this work, or do you have to does this advance it?
Yeah, she's pulling it up right now.
Great, thank you. Perfect, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, my name is Greg Ferris. I represent the property owner in this case. Mr. Green, I think staff's correct. We're not really here today to talk about height. It kind of got lost in the staff report. They talked a lot about it, why it's not part of the variance request, so it shouldn't even be in there. We did go to the airport authority, and we certainly can go
Mr.
that direction
Ferris,
if need to.
Give us your address.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Greg Ferris, 144 South Bay Country Court, Wichita, Kansas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, the arrow keys don't seem to want to do that. Let's see if this works. There we go. I think it's important to understand, and maybe a little bit hard to see, I was a little perplexed when I got the staff report that they denied this application, because this is the 6th one of these cases that I brought before the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the first one that wasn't a consent item, where we asked for an increase in size. Doesn't seem to want to do it. Can you advance that slide? I can't seem to do it from here. This is a sign that is a couple thousand feet to the west of the proposed location on Kellogg, which was a Board of Zoning Appeals variance that was granted. It is substantially more than we're asking for. We're not asking for 300 feet. Bill mentioned 300 feet. This is only going to be 208 square feet sign. This sign that you see here exceeds 300 square feet, was a variance granted on Kellogg with many of the same types of findings that we had here. Could we see the next slide, please? This is a sign that was done with a PUD that is 400 square feet in size, not 300, so it's a 25% increase and a very large sign. This again was done without any controversy or staff opposition. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This was done, go back one, please. This was done about 2 years ago, and again, it's in excess of 300 square feet along Kellogg. Board of Zoning Appeals, we looked at many of the same conditions and situation that you looked at today. It was granted, recommended by staff and granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Next slide, please. This is one that is also 400 square feet, which is again a very large size. Granted again by a CUP amendment, or adjustment actually. Staff not only recommended it, we didn't even have to go through a hearing process because it was recognized that many of the findings and conditions that I brought forward in my report today corresponded to this location. Next slide, please. The fifth site actually is so new that it hasn't been constructed yet. All right, it's just been constructed, and Google did not have a photograph of that. It's at Kellogg and Armour, I'm sorry, not Armour, east of Rock. It is also considerably larger than the 300 square foot that's allowed. It was a Board of Zoning Appeals case last year that was granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals, recommended by staff, with many of the same conditions that I cited today, criteria of how we met those. Next slide, please. There is one issue that staff talked about in their criteria when they mentioned that there are other signs along this area. And if you'll see that every sign, and if you looked at an aerial, you would see that every sign along this right-of-way is in the building setback, which you're allowed to do with an on-site sign. You can put it in a building setback, and there is no issue to that. Next slide, please. You will see that our sign is off the building setback all the way to the building. This requires a slightly larger sign, which, and we're not going, this is only 200 square feet. We're not talking about a gigantic sign here. Go back to the previous slide, if you would, please. If we were to place the sign, and which we would have to do if we don't get a variance, we'll have to move that sign into the building setback. We will block the neighbor signs from readability. I mean, it's not anything that is not allowed in the sign code. As long as it's on our property and we're 50 feet away, we can put up a sign. So by moving it to where we did, further from Kellogg, which does require a larger sign, we actually are benefiting the property owners around us. So when staff is saying that because these other folks didn't get variances, that we are harming them, I do like the language that staff uses. It says that they would not entirely agree with me, which means they don't disagree with my criteria. They just don't entirely agree with my criteria. And, we know that the criteria are somewhat subjective, that you have to look and evaluate those. But I believe if you read through the criteria and my analysis of the criteria, it certainly meets the criteria. We comply with all of the requirements of state law of showing and demonstrating that we follow the criteria. You as a board have agreed with me that these types of criteria in the past do fit this when we talk about Kellogg and the uniqueness and the speed limit and those things. You've agreed with those things in the past, and I think you should agree with those today and would appreciate it if you do. So I believe that and this slide particularly shows how we are not in any way harming any of the neighbors, but in fact are beneficial to them by moving that sign further away from Kellogg. And by moving it further away from Kellogg, we do not distract from their signage, but to move it away further from Kellogg, we do need the additional height. So I believe that I don't have any problem with the conditions that they cite here. I think you should just forget the number one, because you can certainly say that we have to comply with the FAA, because we have to comply with the FAA no matter what. I don't care if you say that. I don't think we need to go into all this other is elevated and all this stuff. I think that's just a bit, and it really isn't part of the variance anyway. But if you want to add that, I don't have any problem with that. The other conditions I don't have any problem with. With that, I'd be glad to answer any question. I believe we've followed the rules. We've complied with the criteria. Staff doesn't even disagree with my criteria. They just don't completely agree with them. I think that if they look and evaluate the cases they've done in the past, that they always agreed with them in the past. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
And Mr. Green?
If we were to approve the variance, would we want to include the 30-foot height? Is that something that your client is going to pursue with the FAA?
That I don't know. That's about a 2 or 3 month process to go through the FAA. I don't know that they want to do that.
Okay.
They certainly have the right to do that. And I don't think, this board's purview is not over the height. This board's purview is over so I don't want you to recommend 30 feet. You don't need to do that. I don't care that you do that, because I'm allowed 30 feet by right, as long as I don't build a second sign. And so, if you want to put it in there, you can, but it's not necessary. Okay. And I think it really distracts from the variance, because the variance is size. The size is not overwhelming. 200 square feet is not even 300 square feet, which is allowed by a lot of these properties along here.
Any other questions? Mr. Ferris? Mr. Warren?
Not so much a question, Mr. Ferris. I guess the concern that I have is not so much with the total square footage, because you're right, we've approved those a number of times all along Kellogg. Kellogg creates a number of unique situations with ramps and off ramps that heights make a difference depending on where you're at in relationship to the ramp. My problem with this one is that it seems to be out of character with the signs of the neighbors around it. I mean, the number of the signs that you had that were narrow and wide were pretty much out by themselves, a large car lot. There were no other signs, no other businesses close to them. This is going to put a rather narrow and extra wide sign in between signs that are more traditional for this area. So that's the concern that I've got.
I think that's a valid argument, Mr. Warren. I think that when you look at the fact that we're moving this off of Kellogg, off of the building setback, because if we build this in the building setback, we will detract from those other signs and actually block the one that is directly, is really the second one that you see. There's some beyond that. So I think that it may be not exactly in character. Now, I didn't show, if you look back to the east, and we might be, I don't know if we can get all the way back there. This is a little bit different setup. You will see that there are signs that are very similar to what I'm talking about, with a pole sign that is, and it happens to be right on the building setback as well. So I don't believe that we are out of character when you look at all of the signage that's along this area. It's just this one little section here. You're right, it may be a little different, but if I move it and I put that sign at 25 feet right there where these other, I'm gonna block the first sign that you see from the cross read, and I'm gonna block the second side you see from the right read. Those people are not gonna be happy, and they may be here today. I don't know that anyone's here to tell you that I'm going to harm them. They all got notice of what it was, so if they think that I'm going to harm them, they certainly would have been here. So I don't believe that we are out of character with everything that's along this area. So I don't completely disagree, like staff, I don't completely disagree with you, but I'm not sure that sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but.
Yeah, you do.
Any other questions of Mr. Ferris?
I have one.
Go ahead.
In the Hi.
Actually, there's
In the
another sign
location
further.
where it is, will it block the signage that's on the facades of the neighboring buildings there, the businesses that have signs right on the face of their buildings?
No, there are no signs to the east and west that are on the facades that are not directly facing Kellogg, so we would not impact those.
Aren't you above the
Okay.
ones that are on the buildings?
It's hard to tell
Yes,
from,
because most of those buildings are going to be 15 feet high, and even at 25 feet high, we're going to be 15 feet up. So no, there wouldn't be any blockage of the facades. Thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions of Mr. Ferris?
Thank you.
Anybody here in the commission want to speak on this item? Anybody in the commission want to speak on this item? Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Anybody virtual? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
Chairman, I move to deny.
Got a motion to deny by Mr. Warren, second by Ms. Foster. Yes. Any discussion?
I have a substitute motion to approve.
I would second that.
Got a substitute motion by Mr. Blick, second by Mr. Green to approve. Any discussion?
To approve, I would use the applicant's criteria that he has submitted. I tend to agree more with his responses to each of the criteria more than I do with the staff analysis of his analysis. That's the reason for my second on that.
Okay. Ms. Foster?
I would just say that I would remind everyone again that the statute requires that all five, not just some, but all five conditions be met. I don't think this is a unique situation. The fact that they're on Kellogg is not unique. There's businesses all up and down Kellogg with signage. And in this particular area, there's nothing unique about this parcel of land or the highway it's trying to make the sign readable from. It's not like it's elevated or depressed or anything. It's just one of a long row of signs. And the fact that they've moved it back out of the building setback doesn't really address the issue that it's almost twice or almost half again the size that the sign statutes or sign regulations allow. So I don't think it follows the intent of the sign regulations. I don't think it's unique, and I don't think it's in character with the neighborhood. That's 3 out of 5 that it does not meet, in my opinion.
Any other discussion?
I have one comment. If you look at this slide, how tall is it measured? It looks to me like it says 30 feet. I know you say height isn't an issue, but if you don't know what the owners want, why is it designed in this graphic as 30 feet tall?
Basically, I think the code allows them to be 35 feet, but they can put it at any height, but to go over 25 foot, they got to get approval by the FAA, which that's up to the applicant or.
This was submitted as a drawing that was done initially before we went to the airport, and that's why it shows 30 feet. I do have some drawings that show 25 feet. I didn't bring them because I didn't think it was germane to our discussion, but the very likelihood is that it will end up at 25 feet.
Any other discussion? I guess we'll vote on the substitute motion first.
Yes, sir. This is for the substitute motion to approve. Bill Johnson?
Yes?
Fox?
No.
McKay?
Yes.
Green?
Yes.
Dool? Absent. Blick?
Yes.
Nix?
No.
Foster? No. Warren?
No.
Joe Johnson?
Yes.
Miles?
Yes.
Hartman?
No.
Cunningham?
No.
And Williams Bay?
Abstain.
Abstain. 6 in favor, 6 opposed. The action does not pass.
Now let's vote on the original.
On the original motion to deny, Bill Johnson?
No?
Fox?
Yes.
McKay?
No.
Green?
No.
Dool's absent. Blick?
No.
Nix? Foster?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Joe Johnson?
No.
Miles?
Muted.
Cindy Miles?
Yes.
Hartman?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Mike?
Sorry, we didn't get that one.
Mike's
Cunningham?
off. There we go.
Yes.
And Williams Bay? Abstain. 6, 7. 7 in favor, 5 against, 1 abstention. Motion passes.
That completes what our agenda on the Board of Zoning Appeals, so we're gonna go back to the Planning Commission meeting. I guess want to introduce Mr. John Williams Bay. He's a new commissioner. I think just got sworn in about 25 minutes ago, so welcome aboard. Okay, the first one we were going to hear is PUD 2022-00003. I believe Mr. Green wanted to hear this case.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. So the applicant in this case is requesting a zone change from limited commercial with a CUP to PUD planned unit development to create the North 45th planned unit development. This site is 30.92 acres and is generally located southeast of North 45th and Ridge Road. The purpose of this PUD is to create a multifamily residential zoning district with non-standard side yard setbacks. This PUD has one parcel. Can you pull up the PUD image? Uses on parcel 1 are those permitted by right in the TF3 two-family residential zoning district. Development standards afford the ability for duplex development on a single lot or for one lot to have 2 single-family dwelling units built as long as they maintain a minimum separation of 5 feet between the dwellings. The lots may be divided between dwelling units or along the common wall of a duplex. In such cases, minimum lot areas will not apply. The PUD does not stipulate which lots shall be developed with duplexes and which shall be developed with single-family lots. Parcel 1, or single-family concepts. Parcel 1 is platted into 83 lots and 11 reserves. Therefore, up to 166 dwelling units could be built, regardless of being in the form of a duplex or a single-family concept. If we look at the zoning map, you can see that to the north is zoned SF20 single-family. To the south, we have K96. To the south of that, we have general commercial and limited commercial. To the east, we have undeveloped SF20 property, and then to the west, we have SF20 and limited commercial property that's part of this CUP 301. I don't believe I said this part, but the site is subject to the North 45th Place Community Unit Plan, DP 301. The subject site is located wholly within Parcel 1B of that CUP. Parcel 1B only allows a maximum number of 7 buildings, so this concept is not in conformance with that CUP. So the property will need to be removed from CUP DP 301. Staff is recommending approval of this application subject to the provisions of the PUD, plus the conditions in your staff report, and that includes that the subject property shall be removed from the CUP. I can go through some of these images. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is showing the layout of the PUD. Next slide. This is showing the location within our future growth concept map, which shows that it's appropriate for a new residential and employment mix. Next slide. This is the CUP, just showing that the property we're looking at is parcel 1B on here. Next slide. This is an exhibit from the applicant showing that they do intend to remove the orange portion out of the CUP and leave the red portion in the far southeastern corner as part of that CUP. Next slide. Here's some images. This is looking at the site from 45th Street looking south. Next slide. This is undeveloped property to the north. Next slide. This is a single-family residence to the east of the subject property. Next slide. And this is to the west of the subject property. It's my understanding that this developer has used this concept in a couple other places here in town. They might be able to talk a little bit more about that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I guess my major concern with this is the lack of access into the property itself. They show the main entrance being up there on 45th Street. They show 4 what appears to be access points to the east into that church property, which I think initially it was believed that they were going to be able to buy that property and use that for their access. And from what I hear, the church is not selling that, which then leaves the one little tail down at the southwest corner of the property itself. So I guess my concern is the amount of access for potentially 166 dwelling units and one point of Ingress and egress.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say this was platted back in 2020. I'm sure that the applicant can give us a little bit more information on how they intend to use those reserves on there and if they still intend to connect to neighboring properties or not.
Any other questions, staff? Seeing none, thank you. Applicant or agent?
Good afternoon, Phil Meyer with Boston Company, agent for the applicant. Yeah, this is the third time we have used a PUD with the same general provisions to achieve this goal, to be able to split up some of these duplexes and adjust side yard setbacks. We've done it at Northgate, which is Meridian and 53rd Street North. We have done it at Dugan West Kellogg, which is Kellogg and 135th. As for the conversations on the access control, this property is already platted. The access is established, it is completed. I think today we're discussing zoning and our ability to be able to split these up a little more creatively than is allowed with the zoning district limited commercial. Although we're building duplexes, this property is presently zoned LC for limited commercial. During the platting process, fire department required us to supply 2 street stubs to the east, which we did, along with 2 additional for flexibility of where that could happen. So we provided 4 total. And then we have 1 to the west, which ties into the emergency access opening that we have worked out with the fire department to be able to start this development. So I'm really hoping we don't have a long conversation about access today, because that should not be the topic of conversation, in my personal opinion. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it, Phil, but the 4 access points to the east, do those actually go somewhere? I mean, they're going to have to be, they're going to have to meet city requirements for access points. Do they just go to a field? Do they go to some place that they'll be able to connect up to 45th Street? The one on the southwest corner, that access point down there, is that already planned to be paved and providing access, say, out to Ridge Road?
Emergency access only. The one in the southwest corner is sharing the road that goes to the lift station that has been built down there. So there is a good concrete paved access road for the fire department to use. The property to the east is platted as one big lot for Midland Baptist Church. They have in the past talked about developing that. They have talked to the developer of this property in the past about him potentially developing that. I think the church is looking to someday have some housing north of their church. I have no idea whether who would be doing that development at that time, but that's when the connection could occur to this subdivision. But again, I want to point out to everybody, this plat's done, it's recorded. If you deny this PUD today, we're still building duplexes, just without the flexibility of side yard setbacks.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thanks, Phil. Is there anybody in the commission chamber here want to speak on this item? Anybody want to speak on it? Is there anybody virtual want to speak on it? Anybody virtual? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to commission. What's a favorite?
I'll move for approval, subject to staff comments.
Second.
Got a motion approved by Mr. Hartman, second by Mr. Warren. Oh, Mr. McKay. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out for the record that it appears that Mr. Blick is no longer with us, so that vote will be a little bit different than some of the other ones. So it'll be 12 votes.
Is Joe still here?
Joe Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. I lost his
Yes.
picture.
Yeah, I got a slow internet.
Where are you, Joe?
All right. That motion passes. Next item is PUD 2022-00004 and 2022-00009. Philip, there's additional information that Philip's got, so that's why we're here in this case.
Yes, good afternoon. Philip Ziebenbergen with planning staff. Before I get into the meat of this, there are 3 cases we are considering with 1 staff report, and that's because the amendments to the 2 CUPs are a means to an end to create the land to rezone for the planned unit development that the majority of the staff report focuses on. As it's listed on your recommendations page, I believe that's page 6, we got the guidance from city law that you will need to have 3 separate motions, just so we have very clear and decisive actions on each separate case type, since we are having conditions of approval for the CUP amendments as well as conditions of approval for the planned unit development case as well. So we'll get to that when we get there. I will try to be as concise as possible with the level of detail. This case is just complex. It isn't necessarily out of the ordinary. It's just how we get to the PUD is just a little different. As you can see on the map in front of you, this project is located north of K96 on the west side of Meridian. If you're familiar with the area, if you go to the aerial image, this is Riverlawn Church here. This is the Northside Church of Christ. This development up here, and actually going off the page, is the Moorings development. And so the PUD is actually called the Courtyards at the Moorings. It's kind of hearkening to like another addition onto the greater Moorings development. In general, the amendments to the PUD, or amendments to the CUPs, are to remove land out of the CUP, so though the community unit plan language no longer governs that land, so that the language of the PUD can govern it instead. Very much like the previous case we heard, they want to remove the land out of the CUP in order for the PUD to have governance over the land. So that's really why we're here with the amendments to the CUP, simply to remove the land out. There's a couple nuances to those amendments as well that I'll go into in just a second. But that's overall the goal, is to change what governing language governs the land within the red circle on your screen. We go to the exhibit that actually shows, like, it's kind of the blue and the yellow. There you go. Okay. All of the property in yellow is within CUP DP 78, the moorings. All the property in blue is in CUP DP 323, lakeside at the moorings. Those are the 2 CUPs that are being amended. All of the land within the red boundary is the land that they want to rezone to the PUD. So therefore, all of the land within both CUPs within that red boundary are being removed from those CUPs. So that's the end goal of what we're doing here. Let me get to a couple particulars about the amendments to the CUP, because they're amending a little bit of the language of the CUPs in addition to removing the land. And it's in response to the fact that they're proposing a residential development in the middle. Currently, the land within the red boundary of the PUD is zoned mostly limited commercial. The majority of what that community unit plan, DP 323, what's in blue, was meant to be a commercial CUP, even all the way that far back from Meridian. Parcel 9 of DP 78 here, which is the Church of Christ property, the CUP limits the uses on that land to those allowed in single-family SF5. So though it's zoned commercial, the uses on the land can only be those permitted in SF5. A church is allowed in SF5. The CUP requires a landscape buffering on the south and the west parcel lines of that. One of the requests of this CUP amendment to 78 is to no longer have that screening requirement. As you can see, some of that land is actually going to be removed from the CUP. And the other rationale behind that is the purpose of the PUD in the middle here is to do a residential planned unit development, no commercial at all. And so if you had a church in single-family residential zoning, next to houses in single-family residential zoning, you would not need any screening. That's kind of how we're looking at this, is that CUP restricts the uses on that parcel to single-family. It's already constructed with a church. The rationale is you normally wouldn't necessarily need screening there. So that's one of the requests from the applicant as part of the amendment to DP 78. If we move down to the amendment to DP 323, which is the property in blue, you can see that when you actually take out everything within the red line, you're left with just fragments of it over here along Meridian, as well as what's left of parcel 9 down here to the south. One of the requests from the applicant regarding the amendment to this CUP is that, as I mentioned before, this entire CUP, everything in blue, is commercial property. So the community unit plan actually did not require any of these standard screening requirements of a masonry wall around the perimeter of the CUP, because all of the land around there was commercial. There was no need for screening because it was commercial next to commercial. So in response to this land over here being a commercial CUP still, and the land in the middle here being a residential development, they want to add a provision to require the standard screening of the masonry wall along the sides and the rear of this CUP because of the commercial and residential developments coming together, like you would like we typically see, you know, at where major commercial shopping centers butt up against a residential neighborhood. With that information, parcel 9 has language that talks about if it's constructed with warehouse self-storage, that the buildings are allowed to act as part of that screening requirement. They would be allowed to be built close to the property line, and instead of putting a wall behind them, you just use the building as your screening, which we've allowed in the past as well. You do have a piece of paper at your desk. There's a change that came this week where initially the recommended language talked about the south and the east lines that the buildings would be allowed to do that. The applicant wanted to put in that the buildings could be used as part of the screening along the north line of parcel 9 as well. So that's just really the only new piece of information that was not originally in your staff report, was to allow along the north property line of parcel 9, to allow, if it's developed with warehouse self-storage, to allow the building to act as part of the screening along that north parcel line, as it would be allowed on the south and the east. So when we get to the recommendation section, I'll review these little nuances and we'll take them one at a time so that we all make sure we're understanding what we're approving and what the conditions of approval and what the recommended language will be. So those take care of the amendments to the CUPs. Relatively simple, relatively cut and dry. The majority of the effort in the amendments is to remove the land, a couple little cleanup things with the language regarding screening related to the use that's going to be going on in the middle. Moving into the heart of it, we have the planned unit development. If you want to go to the PUD drawing, here we go. This is what they are proposing for the planned unit development. PUD 95, the courtyards at the moorings. They're proposing 171 residential lots and several reserves. These lots will be surrounded by a typical street network. However, they are planning on some alleyways in the center portion of the PUD. The idea being they're looking for a little bit more compact cluster type development, have garages along the rear, along the alley. You have front porch style development along greenways or along the streets. Keep the vehicular things to the back, keep all the utilities to the back, trash service, stuff like that. The difference is along the perimeter, you'll have the garages out front. They'll still be a little bit smaller cluster style development. You just don't have the alleyways in the back along the perimeter. Where this PUD is unique and goes beyond what is allowed in single-family SF5 is reductions to setbacks. And you can see, and I'm not going to go through the detail. If you have specific questions about the details of the PUD, I'd be happy to cover those. But in general, they're looking to have reductions of most setbacks, and they differ depending on if you are on an alley property or if you're on a non-alley property. The non-alley properties have more setbacks, their setbacks are greater. If you're on an alley property, the buildings are allowed to be closer to each property line in order to especially facilitate the garages being on the alleys and not having to have so much space between the alley and your garage. And to facilitate more of a cluster style development, we're a little bit closer to your neighbors, inviting more community. One other thing that they're looking at doing is they can have 4,000 square foot lot sizes. That is permitted in SF5. They're looking to do zero lot line development, which basically means instead of specifying a hard side setback, if you have one property where they build the house on the property line, the other house has to be 6 feet away from that. So they're basically shifting from a setback requirement to a minimum distance requirement between the houses. So if one house builds 3 feet from the property line, the other house can build 3 feet from the property line. So as long as you maintain that 6 foot separation, you can build houses where kind of flex where on the property they are built. So it would allow a property to have a house on the property line. The next house over would have to be set back 6 feet to maintain that distance. They're allowing a 2 foot reduction in the minimum lot width. Instead of 50, they're allowing 48. They talk about a 75% lot coverage. Typical zoning standards don't get into the detail of lot coverage. That's usually governed by how big is the lot and how much buildable space you have within your setbacks. I did just a standard calculation to give you guys some idea of what that might look like if you have a typical lot, which could be 50 by 140, it's a small lot, and you were to adhere to all of your setbacks that are standard in SF5, you'd have a 56% lot coverage. So they're allowing a little bit more lot coverage and less yard to mow, more house to enjoy. They're allowing a 5 foot increase in height. They're allowing covered patios to be in the setbacks. Those typically wouldn't be, but how much it gets into the setback, again, is governed by the lot coverage, where if you have the majority of the house covering the property, how much that is available to go into the setback as a covered patio is governed by how much square footage you have on the lot already. You can't exceed the 75% lot coverage. One thing where staff and the applicant disagree is they're proposing to require 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. The zoning code only requires 1 for single-family dwellings. Our perspective from staff is the developer can build 2 spaces. Why would we require them to build 2 spaces? You know, if it's exceeding the maximum parking requirement that the zoning code has, they have the ability and the ability to build more parking spaces per unit if they want to. Why would we require that? So that's part of our recommendation for the PUD, is that language be stricken out of the PUD language to only allow it, require the amount of parking that the zoning code requires. Similar types of development to this have been approved at 127th and Pawnee, where we actually allowed smaller setbacks, so a greater reduction in setbacks for residential development for this type of a concept where you have dwellings built on greenways with alley service in the back for garages and other types of things. So this isn't necessarily uncommon. It's becoming a little bit more common. I know that the applicant has done a similar development like this with single-family residential in Andover. And there are other concepts like this around the country that I'm sure they will speak of as well. If we go back to the zoning map or the aerial map, the surrounding area is a mix of residential and commercial as well as civic uses. We've kind of already talked about it. To the north, we have the Moorings development, all single-family residential. There's the 2 church properties along Meridian. Right here is a bank, and this is a fire station. talked about how this is going to remain commercial with the intent of developing it commercially. This property here is office warehouse, and it looks like they might have the intention of doing self-storage warehouse based on how the CUP is written. This property here was recently approved to rezone for multifamily residential. Can see based on the plats around here is east of Meridian is single-family residential, and this is commercial down here. So it very much fits in with the character. You're having some residential uses. It's just a little bit higher density and a cluster-style development. The comprehensive plan, if you go to the land use guide, identifies the space as appropriate for new residential in addition to parks and open space. The area that's identified for parks and open space is actually this area here on the northwest part of the PUD that is already occupied by the drainage basin, kind of the connection from the moorings lake, which the plat is currently working through, but I believe they are able to use it as their detention basin for stormwater. And so the area of the PUD that's within the new residential is the part that's actually going to be built with new residential. So it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. I have not heard any opposition to this request. I have had several phone calls. Considering the probably thousands of individuals who have been notified because of the notification, this was probably the largest ownership list we've ever received, because you had to notify everybody within the moorings and 1,000 feet around it. So like 62 pages of property owners. I've had 3 phone calls, and all of them were more curious. Hey, we see signs going up. We've heard rumblings. Our moorings next door page is blowing up with idea of what's going on, and just basically explaining what I've explained to you now, and nobody's ever actually been against it. It was at the District Advisory Board 6 on Monday. There was no opposition at that. The District Advisory Board recommended approval, subject to staff comments unanimously. So I can go through the pictures of this site real quick, and then we'll run into the breakdown of the recommendations. And then we'll open it up to questions from you guys and open the floor to the applicant. You want to jump to the pictures? There we go. So this is standing on what will be the entrance drive into the property, looking north at the Church of Christ property. Next picture. This is standing in the same location looking south. This is Riverlawn Church. This property straight in front of us is still part of the commercial CUP that won't be taken out. This is slotted for commercial development. The PUD is to the west of it, to the right on your screen. Next picture. This is looking to the east. This is what will be the main road coming in. Obviously, it will be improved by that time. Meridian's in front of us, and you have the lake across Meridian. Next picture. This is on the north side. This is Cobblestone Street, where the unimproved portion of it actually meets the stub that goes into the moorings. You can see the single-family development within the moorings. Next picture. This is looking to the northwest, kind of again at the boundary of the moorings, looking to the northwest. Next picture. This is looking from the bank property. Again, that's the Church of Christ. This initial land in the foreground here is commercial. The land over to the west is what would be developed residentially in the PUD. Next picture. This is looking to the southwest. This is the bank. This is the fire station on the very south side of the area. Next picture. And that's it. Okay. So I'm going to go briefly over these recommendations again, and when it comes time for action, if you need, reminding of what we're actually looking to approve with staff language, I'd be happy to review those at that time as well. So we have a recommendation for approval for amendment to DP 78. The language we are looking to amend in that, number 1, takes the land out of the CUP, in addition to removing the need for the landscape barrier along parcel 9 because of the church development being next to the residential development that is proposed. The recommendation for DP 323, which is the land down here, is approval, subject to the language in your staff report, with the addition of adding the north line to allowing a warehouse self-storage building acting as a screening requirement, acting towards a screening requirement on parcel 9 down here on the south side of the area. That's the addition that was new to your staff report today. And then the recommendation for the planned unit development is recommending approval. The only change that staff has to the PUD language is removing the requirement for 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Otherwise, staff is in agreement with the PUD language that is in there. If you go to page 17, you can see under number 5, we struck out that just so you can see what we are amending to that language. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions, staff?
Are we confused?
Yeah, it appears as though on map on page 16, that cobblestone will connect to this development?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Any other questions, staff?
And I believe that'll take care of the second point of access.
Reading my mind there.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Would you say the reason why they reduced the parking requirement from 2 to 1 is because the contractor normally provides 2 spaces? I couldn't quite hear you.
Yeah, so the zoning code only requires 1 parking space per dwelling unit.
Right.
The applicant is actually looking at requiring more parking per dwelling unit than the zoning code allows. So staff's recommendation is, let's just keep it at what the zoning code requires with 1 parking space. If you want to build more parking per dwelling unit, you can do that on your own. We just don't want it to be required in the PUD.
Okay.
Any other questions, staff? Applicant or agent, please. Give us your name and address. You got 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Joey Denicky with MKC Engineering, 411 North Webb Road, agent on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined here with the applicants as well. Thank you, Philip, for that great explanation of what we're doing. I know early on we were going through it and it seemed very complex, but he broke it down really simple, and I think did a really good job. So I won't speak too much towards the CUPs, but the heart of the matter is the PUD itself, and we're really excited about this development. It's a traditional neighborhood design that we're going towards, where you utilize that alley for the access point for the vehicles, and the front of the house will be abutting the streets there, as well as greenways. So I think it's a great just community environment. Everything's compact. The idea is rather than having yard space, you have more house. You also have that green space where other people can kind of go out and mingle together. So again, we think this is going to be a great opportunity for this neighborhood. We've done some similar concepts in nearby communities, and it's been taken off really well. We've also noticed nationwide, this neighborhood design is starting to be a big hit. So I kind of foresee there's going to be additional neighborhoods in Wichita that's similar to this. So I will touch on access point. You mentioned it. We will connect into cobblestone there as well, so that 2 points of access. And we are in agreement with staff comments with the parking requirements as well. So that all.
Any questions, the agent? Mr. Warren?
Concept is popular. This is what people want. It really has nothing to do with the PUD per se, but when you put this many people close together, drainage is an issue. And then a number of years ago, we had some problems with some flooding around some of our local lakes. That's all been taken into consideration. You guys have figured out how to get the water away from these properties and not creating a problem downstream.
Correct, and you'll actually be hearing this plat here in a couple weeks. It's going to subdivision next week. We're working through all those drainage components right now, and it's being looked at. So,
Any other questions, the agent? Thank you. Anyone here in the commission chambers want to speak on this item? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear or speak on this item? Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Anybody virtual? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to commission.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to approve the request and take the recommended conditions that are listed on page 6 as my motion.
That's on
We need
DP
three
78.
motions.
I guess we can defer to law on this with.
Or do you want
no-
each of them to be broken down individually?
Yes.
Okay, so my motion is to take the recommended action on CUP DP 78.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Green, second by Ms. Fox. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, now we're gonna hear,
I also move to approve take the staff's recommended actions on CUP DP 323 as listed on page 6.
Second.
got a motion to approve by Mr. Green, second by Ms. Fox. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that passes.
And I move to I move to approve, approve the PUD number 95 with the exception of the 2 parking stall requirement, that we go ahead and use the 1 stall requirement. And I believe the applicant has agreed to that verbally, so.
I'll second that.
Got a motion by Mr. Green, second by Mr. Hartman. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? That passes also. Is there any other business?
Sorry, I have just one brief note, and I would like to introduce Christina. If you could come up to the podium and just say hello. She has been hired and filled the position that Kathy Morgan retired from, and so we're very excited that Christina's here. And so this is just an opportunity to say hi.
Hi, thank you guys for having me here today.
Aye.
Aye.
Welcome.
You were supposed to give 5 minutes.
No. Now make sure they change the phone, put your name on it, because Kathy's still on there.
For the heads up, we'll make a note of that one.
Any other business? If not, we're adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, John. Good. Long time no see. It's been an end. Yeah, it has been. I know it's been, well, this